Guten Tag, Mahlzeit, herzlich willkommen, bonjour, welcome. My name is Oliver Gorf. I am the director of Goethe-Zentrum Atlanta. Before we start, some housekeeping issues. Please turn your microphones off. We are making sure that the speaker is the main image and so in the center of our attention. There might or might not occur technical problems. If they occur, please just be patient. We're going to solve them quickly. We have guests from France, from Germany, and the USA. How can the French, the German, the European perspective on climate crisis benefit Atlanta and America, and vice versa? And should Europeans actually be part of the American conversation? The answer to the latter question for me is a clear yes. The nature of the climate crisis is that it is a global crisis. And it is also true that Europe and North America have historically been and still are the primary drivers of the climate change. This makes us not only that makes it not only possible, but a humanitarian duty for both continents to exchange best practices and visions in environmentalism. Solutions need to be culturally coherent, though. When I turned 18 in 1988, I decided not to obtain a driver's license for ecological reasons, actually. It was only when I moved to the US at age 40 that I had to buy my first car ever, adapting to a culture based on car compatibility. My carbon footprint increased, but what could I do? It's not the individual, it takes a society, it takes us to save the planet. And again, to create such a society demands communication and exchange. This is what we want to talk about today. How do our experts communicate climate crisis in contemporary culture? And with this, I give the word to Richard, our co-host.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you to our wonderful panel. I'd like to welcome you to the first event of the Climate Crisis in Contemporary Culture series, a joint cultural programming of Atlanta's Alliance Française and Goethe-Zentrum. The program we kick off today confronts an important problem facing our planet, but we believe it does so in an innovative way. By emphasizing culture as much as science, we underline the human and interpersonal nature of a problem, which on a global scale requires deep collaboration and cultural understanding. The breaking down of barriers erected often by the very creation of the problem itself is what we're talking about today. It's for this reason we believe also that our partnership, that the partnership between the Goethe and the Alliance Française of Atlanta, one of only 9 like it in the world, is so important for our great city. The Goethe and the Alliance Française share a mission of promoting cross-cultural understanding, of deepening our understanding of ourselves by confronting our knowledge of others, and playing a vital role in the cultural life of our international city. This is why we joined forces in 2009 and why we will reaffirm our cooperation with the opening of our new Franco-German center this fall. Our collaboration was also the reason we were honored with the financial support of the Franco-German Fund, without which this programming would not have been possible. We also want to thank the French and German consulates and the French Cultural Services for their help and guidance in putting on this exciting program that will continue from now to the end of this year. I'm also pleased to introduce, but have to give the excuses of our moderator. Ricky Bevington has fallen ill. She is a 2-time Emmy-winning journalist and influential advocate for independent media, and our source here in Georgia for national news is the Atlanta based host of National Public Radio's All Things Considered. She was supposed to be here, but she's lost her voice and has not been on the radio for the last week. So I again would ask your patience, because Oliver and I are going to be filling in as moderators of the discussion. For the discussion, just put questions in the chat, and we will use them to try and animate the discussion after each of the presenters has made their presentation. Our first, I'm looking for my list of the bios. Where did that go?
Yeah. So if you will have any questions, just join them in the chat. We can maybe do a quick run through all of our guests so that you know who's coming up, and then we will start with Frederic, and Richard is going to introduce him. So we have Frederic, and I'm sorry, my French is really bad. Aït-Touati. Can you say hello quickly?
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you.
Barbara Dombrowski.
Yeah. Hello,
Max,
everybody.
I'm ready now.
Max Greenish.
Hello.
And Paige Swift.
Hi there.
And you will hear from all of them about how they try to communicate the climate crisis. And Richard, your turn.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your patience. Our first speaker is Frederic Aït-Touati. She is someone I admire very much, because she's a historian of literature and modern science, a 17th century specialist, what we call early modern, and a theater director as well. She's currently a research fellow at the CNRS and a member of the Centre de Recherche sur les Arts et le Langage at the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales. She works on the uses of fiction and narrative in astronomy in the 17th century, as well as the history of images and scientific instruments. She has several books that include Fictions of the Cosmos from 2011, Histoire et Savoir from 2012, Le Monde en Images 2015, and Terraforma from 2019. Thank you very much, Frédéric, for coming to us from Bretagne.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. Thank you, all of you. I'm extremely pleased to be talking and meeting you tonight. This is our new way of communicating, and I must say it's always a very strong feeling when we can communicate throughout the world as we do now. I try to be very quick, and I put my special device for that. But I'd like to say how pleased I am to discuss with you all tonight about something which is so important for us all. And as was mentioned in the introduction, the relation between Europe and US on those questions is absolutely key for our understanding of what's going on. What I will try to do quickly today is to share with you in what way climate change and the Anthropocene, whatever we want to call that, cosmological upheaval that happens to us has changed for me very simply, very concretely, in terms of research, but also in terms of theatre. And I will try to give you a few examples, very simple examples, on the ways in which I have tried not only to share ideas and research and examples and facts, but also to cope with what's happening myself. I think it's very important to realize, at least for me as a researcher, that the first moment was really to receive the problem and to know what to do with that and what to do as a researcher. In a way, we could say that some of the most vivid political questions of the ecological crisis are actually question of dramaturgy or set design, basically questions of theater. Why? Because one of the questions is basically who speaks, who is allowed to speak, who distributes the roles, who has the power to act and how, who decides on the occupation of territories, on the way we move, and also what is the stage of the anthropos, you know, the famous anthropos of the Anthropocene, the very much disputed anthropos. What does it mean to share this stage, to live on Earth among the other living beings? So basically for me, the question of understanding what the scientists, what the climatologists tell us had to go through theater, but also through experiment, through history. And in a way, what I find very interesting is the fact that the difficulty we have in representing what Timothy Merton called the hyper objects of climate change, of climate chaos, actually this very difficulty to represent make arts, make culture even more necessary than ever. We need set design, we need new kind of maps, we need artifacts to understand reality, to understand what's around us and what we do with it. And in fact, my own take on that is the fact that theatre has a specific role to play, perhaps because it is itself a small world. And over the past 10 years, theatre has become one of the main heuristic tools, a tool to understand, a tool to research for me in my research into the understanding of the change of our terrestrial space. And this research, as Richard mentioned, I've been doing mostly with Bruno Latour. I couldn't really say that we have a theatre company making big productions. What we have is a kind of small research group with whom we make experiments, exactly like in a laboratory. And the point is how we use the stage, how we use the theatre as a way to think, as a way to represent the problems, not to solve it. I'm sorry, I won't, of course, I won't give any solution, but it's a way to re-ask the questions in another way. So in the remaining 4 minutes that I have, I will give you a few examples of those experiments of this kind of theatrical laboratory that we have invented together. I just wanted to mention as well that I actually don't separate anymore research and theatre, and maybe it's something important to mention. One of the main effects that climate change has had on me in a very personal, humble way is that I don't see the point of dividing the disciplines anymore. I don't have the time. It's a matter of political emergency, of theoretical emergency as well. So the question of, okay, should I do theatre or not? Am I allowed, because I'm a CNRS researcher, to do theatre? Do I have the right school? Do you have the legitimacy? These kind of questions are just completely erased by what's going on. And that's something I wanted to share with you. So basically, I move between theatre, books, articles, research, pedagogy, school, students, colleagues, in a very fluid way, because, you know, it's not the time to divide things anymore. The main theatre experiments I've been doing are with this theatre company, which is called Critical Zone, with Bruno Latour. And the most recent project is called the Terrestrial Trilogy. It's a kind of triptych trilogy that began in 2016 with a production, a performance called Inside. Then that was followed by Moving Earth. And this year, last month, we created Viral. We couldn't share it. We could not share it with the audience because Paris was still completely under lockdown, but that was the most recent performance that we created with Bruno. And the whole project, the whole trilogy is an attempt to think about how to renew our representation of the Earth, both in terms of biotic and abiotic world, living and non-living world. But what is interesting for me is that this kind of experiment, I also continue to do them in research, as I was mentioning, and I do that with architects. And I just mentioned the fact that, again, this is a parallel effort. This is a parallel endeavor. So the other project I will mention briefly is called Terraforma, and it's a book that I made with two architects. And for me, I would say it's a common attempt to represent, to find new images. Of course, you will tell me, okay, we have enough images, we are completely covered by images, but paradoxically, we don't really have images of what's going on in terms of climate change, in terms of the changing representations of the Earth. And this is what this trilogy, theatrical trilogy, tries to do, to explore visual alternatives to our old-fashioned globe. And in Moving Earth, for instance, we go through the theater experiment into a moving, a reactive Earth. And in Viral, we try to go into the infinitely small, into the essence of life on Earth, but also the political consequences of the new definition of life, which is given by biology, for instance. I will just finally give you three hypotheses that we've been testing with theatre and also with research, with Terraforma. The first hypothesis is that, in fact, the Earth we think we know is a terra incognita, an unknown Earth, which we have to explore with new tools in new ways. And indeed, our common representations of the Earth are global. They are unified representations. They do not really take into account the variety of the modes of existence, the variety of cosmologies. So in fact, when we think of the Earth, it's the image of the globe that appears. How can we equip ourselves to re-explore, to rediscover the world? This is something that really fascinates me, how you can use theatre as a tool to get sensitive in a new way. And I would say that this is really the core of what I'm trying to do, to combine what I would call the aesthetics of art and the aesthetics of science. And here I take the term aesthetics in the original definition given in the 18th century by Baumgartner. The aesthetics is the art of feeling, the art of sensing. And in that way, aesthetics means that you don't have an immediate access to things. You need to equip yourself, you need tools. And it's very interesting, I believe, to combine the tools of art, the tools of science, the tools of research. And that goes back to what I was telling you before. We don't have the time to divide anymore. We need to unite our strength. And that's why I continue to wave the different projects and ideas with so many different people. And I realize that I'm already 3 minutes late, so I stop now. But thank you again, and I'd be very happy to discuss those projects.
Thank you very much, Frederic. Yes, we do have a nice marching schedule here to keep going, so I appreciate that. Very interesting. And Oliver, next speaker.
Yeah, merci, Frederic. That was very interesting, and I can assure you I have questions later. But I hope also our guests. We're coming now to Max Greenish, who is originally from Berlin and now lives in the United States. And like all of our guests, I want to emphasize that all the participants in this kickoff event will return in one way or the other to Atlanta, to us, to our event series in the fall and the winter, and so will Max Greenish. Let me shortly introduce him in a way. He's a climate and energy economist, so very different species, maybe, some would argue, than an artist, but maybe not. We will hear about it, with expertise and experience in the US and Europe. He was the president of the Ecologic Institute US and worked for the Ecologic Institute Berlin. His work focuses on sustainable development in cities and the energy transition. He's a founding member of the European Institute for Sustainable Transport and co-founder and principal of Post-Carbon Cities of Tomorrow, or with a cute acronym, if you allow me that comment, POCACITO. Welcome, Max.
Thank you, Oliver. Yes, good afternoon, bonjour, and hello. It's a real pleasure to be part of this conversation here today with you. And I see my picture is already up, my only picture for today. So this will be maybe a little bit dominant towards the end of the time, but I'm gonna try to make it interesting anyway. So these questions we had on the agenda: how do words affect our planet? Where do science, arts, and social sciences converge, diverge, and respond to one another? And how do we explain issues as complicated or complex, maybe, as climate change? And how to then also explain possible solutions or explore solutions. These are, of course, very important questions, and I want to take a step back, because for me, two questions come first to my mind when I think about my interaction with communication about climate change. So the first question I usually ask myself is, so why don't we take the necessary actions to stop climate change when we know so much about risks and impacts of climate change? And Oliver, I mean, you mentioned this at the beginning, the very personal dilemma, right? You're moving to the US, you haven't had a car before, and there you are now, you had to, or you came into a situation where you move towards having a car. And so this is, of course, this is one person, one challenge, but as a globe, we're 7 billion or more. And so it just aggregates to a larger problem. And then the question number two is, how do we reach people who are not even asking themselves that question yet, so who are not on board, who either deny that there is a climate change, or who don't think about it, or who don't think it's a problem? And so these are, for me, two fundamentals that always come up with this whole question of communicating or working on climate change, because all my work on climate change, you said in the beginning, I'm an economist, but I don't work so much as an economist. I work more as a kind of an interface or in between the actual policy world or the science world, and relaying and communicating, educating, maybe, if you wish, about climate and sustainability with POCACITO. And but maybe then looking at these two main questions, maybe they're not equally relevant. So I actually thought about this just relatively recently. I joined a training for activists, for organizers, and I learned there that when you organize, you focus on certain subgroups of people, and you go more for the ones who are already accessible and open to action, and you don't go to the hard cases. So I learned that, and that's something definitely worthwhile thinking about the situation of climate change. Then number two thing I learned in this training, also really important, is I learned in order to connect, we need to listen. So there's two important messages, and I would like to share this here with you. So first, maybe not to worry too much about the second group, the people who reject the science of climate change, rather focus on the very large majority across all party lines and generations who understands that there is a climate change, but who is not yet taking the necessary steps or the possible steps to mitigate climate change. And I think that's also because you mentioned this in the beginning, or both Richard and Oliver talked about it. You know, we have Europe, we have the US, but to be honest, neither side, neither region is doing enough or is doing what's necessary. So we can't really say that there's so much of a difference there. There might be different circumstances, different settings, but it's clear that we all need to do much more. And then, yeah.
Awesome. Go ahead.
No. And I was not, but if you want to ask a question, Oliver, you can jump in.
You said you function as a sort of an interface, and I find that an interesting image. Just like what Frederic says, combining the aesthetics of art and aesthetics of science, there seems to be a necessity to bring together different fields where we used to see not connected, and connect them. And I think that kind of mirrors the ecological system in general. But to the point of interface, we are planning together, or with Georgia Tech, as we, meaning Pocacito, Goethe, Alliance Française, and others, a repair cafe on November 13th. That's 2 days before the National Recycling Day. How does that fit into your narrative of interface and reaching other people?
Exactly. I mean, that's a very good point. That's one of the activities that links me also to Atlanta, because right now I'm not in Atlanta, but what does Pocacito have to do with Atlanta? And there are many different parts, but the Repair Cafe definitely is one of the highlights later this year. So Repair Cafe does one very simple thing. People bring broken items. It's a community space, it's free, it's open, and there are volunteers there who then fix or repair together with the people who brought their broken items. Whatever it is, it can be a bicycle, it can be a smartphone, can be anything in between, a hairdryer, can be a night light, or whatever you have in your home, to keep those objects from going into the landfill. So it has an ecological component, has a resource component, has a climate component, because of course, to make more stuff, then we would have more greenhouse gas emissions. So this is very practical, it's a very technical first function, but second function is also this interface is creating community. Actually, it's a lot about empowering people, giving people agency, giving people a platform to connect, to also interact and talk. And it's also breaking down this very complex issue of climate change into something very practical, tangible, very, I would say, you know, very, very down to earth, because it's not about a big policy question. It's not about making a life change. It's about not throwing away the broken light. It's not throwing away the broken hairdryer, but bringing it there, fixing it together, meeting new people, and then actually using the product longer and being happy with it, also saving money, of course, in the same process. And so it's a kind of a win-win-win and more. And in that regard, it's really great that we will do this later this year. There's still some time, it's in November, but it's good to raise that issue already. And it's also, of course, wonderful to do this at the end of the pandemic, when we can meet in person again, and when we have that opportunity to start it. There hasn't been a repair cafe in Atlanta, so this is the first, and then we want to have this as a recurring event, so it's not a one-time event. And I think we're already over the time limit. I just want to explain real quick the picture that everybody had to look at for a few minutes now already. This is the warming stripes idea, was developed by Ed Hawkins at the University of Reading, and we just changed a little bit the colors and the data, of course, for one of our educational programs, just to show a very complicated information data set about temperature deviations from normal over time frame. So each bar, each stripe is a year, and the color change, the color shows the deviation from normal. And the original one was with red and blue, and we used this green and yellow. You can use, of course, any other colors. You can also use it for other indicators. Doesn't have to be temperature, could be rainfall, precipitation, can be anything you want. It's just one way of taking scientific, technical information, if you wish, breaking it down into a visually appealing aesthetic, to pick up the word from Frederic, into something that you might want to look at for longer. Now you looked already at it for 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop here and take then questions later. I'm very happy to be part of that conversation here today.
Vielen Dank, Max. And I'm sure there will be interest in this repair cafe later, which we support. Good. I want to come to our next guest, also from Germany. And I'm proud to say she's currently staying in Hamburg, which is my hometown. And not only that, it seems to be actually hot in Hamburg, which is almost unknown, and maybe, who knows, an effect already of climate change. Our guest is Barbara Dombrowski. Hello, Barbara.
Hello.
We saw a lot of colors right now from Max. Frederic talked also about uniting our strengths and bringing people together, really. And I think that's really, for your work, right in your ballpark, I would say. You're a photographer, an artist. You studied visual communications. Your work that is super interesting, year-long work, Tropic Ice. You started about 10 years ago, I would think, but you will tell us more and more accurate about it. It's very fascinating. What I like about your work a lot is that you attempted to be public art, so visible for everyone, not only museums. And currently also you are working next to a lot of festivals and art exhibitions in Europe. You're working on a book, Alltagswelten im Klimawandel, so kind of everyday worlds in climate change. Welcome, Barbara, and I know you have a presentation for us, so I don't want to, with no further ado, I'll let you take the word.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you very much for inviting me to Atlanta. I want to say hello to everybody in France, in Italy. I'm very pleased to be here with you today, and I would like to introduce you to my worldwide photo art project, which is called Tropic Ice. Dialogue between places affected by climate change, and hopefully you can see it now. Yeah, okay. It's not, maybe it's not perfect, but it's okay. So I just will introduce you this work, and if you have questions, so please ask them later on. I'll just show you what this is all about. So man-made climate change is a massive threat, not only to nature, ecosystem, and biodiversity, but above all, to people themselves. That is the main topic of my project, on which I have been working continuously for 10 years now. What is it about? There are various estimates of the number of people who will lose their basis of existence due to environmental influences. Some are around 200 million people by 2040, while other estimates are lower. However, it is clear that the number is immense. And most importantly, it is not just about a number, but about destinies. Children, families, entire villages will have to leave their homes. Floods or long periods of drought, large-scale fires and massive extinction of species will make life in many areas of the world difficult, if not impossible. In order to give people a face and to show that everything is interwoven, I have gone to climate-relevant places around the world and visited the people living there, who are in the area of tension between tradition and modernity, and whose living space is threatened by external influences. However, I don't show catastrophes, but rather people with stories and faces. The people who became ambassadors for their continents and climate zones in my project are the Achua and Shua in the Amazonia of Ecuador. So I rather show you now a few pictures, not telling you much about this region and the people and the problems about climate change. What I said before, if you have questions later to the people and to the regions, please ask them later. So I just want to show you some of these people. The Achua live near the Rio Pastaza, which is near the Peruvian border. And the Shua live a little bit more next to the Andes. Next peoples I visited in the first place were the Inuit of East Greenland. And I wanted to show these two peoples in the first place because both of these regions, Amazonia and Greenland, the Arctic, are among the tipping points of the global climate crisis. So that's why I went there first in these two regions. In East Greenland, I've been to two little villages which are called Tinetikiak and Samiliga, and in both of these places are like 100 or 200 people live there. After a few times traveling to these people, taking pictures of them, I decided to go back to the regions with my pictures and make some installations there. That was that. After the first section of photographic documentation, I was concerned how I could find a way to bring the very complex issue of the climate crisis to people so that I would touch them. That is what I decided to reduce my work to portraits embedded in landscape. In the summer of 2013, I returned to Greenland and the Amazonia with large format images. By showing the images where I photographed them and in the other location, I completely reintegrated them into the landscape and created new symbolic images that illustrate the climate crisis. I choose a lightweight textile banner as the material for the installations. The size corresponds to a small person standing upright. The images are challenged in nature in different ways. The aspect of the slowly, by the influence of nature, destroying images contains another level of my work and shows in a haunting way our vulnerability. So after these first two peoples I visited in which are stands for the continent of Europe and America, I went over to Asia and stayed a little while with the Mongolian nomads of Gobi Desert. So, and there I stayed far out in the desert with a family with 2 children, and everybody was like far out. You could just see on the horizon another of these tents, which we called yurte. So it was a little bit different to the other regions, because there I stayed in little villages, and here I just stayed with this one single family. But we went over to all the neighbors and visited them. So the third peoples I went to were in Africa, the Maasai Tribe of the Republic of Tanzania, and these peoples I've been with stay next to Mount Kilimanjaro, and the little village is called Tinga Tinga. And this little village is in a wildlife protected area, what means that the Maasai live there together with the wild animals. And I was there 2017 when there was a severe drought over there, and all the animals died. And usually I don't take these climate crisis pictures. I only portrait people. But this is the only picture I decided to show the problem, the crisis, because he showed me all his cattle which died, and so I decided to just use this picture for my work. And it's the only picture which really shows in this way the climate crisis. So the last place I visited was in Oceania, island atoll state, which is called Kiribati. The people there call themselves Kiribati, and this island atoll state are like 33 little islands, and 21 of them are inhabited. It's just in the middle of nowhere and at the data line and next to the equator. And these atoll islands are very fragile. They're just in the front line of climate crisis. They will be the first who will lose their islands and to have to settle somewhere else. So the former president of Kiribati bought some land and Fiji Islands just for his people, that they can move over to Fiji when they can't live in Kiribati anymore. And it's happening already. So yes. Okay, after visiting all the indigenous peoples on all 5 continents, I finally could bring them together. I have to go back. The animist relationship to the nature surrounding them and the symbolism derived from it inspired me for my presentation of the 5 continents. For the first time in September 2019, I showed an installation of 45 photographs in and near the Hambacher forest in Germany and on the apron of the lignite mine, which unites the people of the 5 continents. By combining and contrasting the portraits of the people, I built a bridge between them, their regions and cultures, bringing them into a dialogue and show that everything is interwoven. The installation is arranged as a circle, made up of portraits and landscape photographs with a center that can be viewed both from the outside and from the inside. A circle not only symbolizes the earth in a cross-section, our planet, the universe, and every living being forms a unity within it. The animistic belief is that all living beings are equal and ensouled and part of the circle. There is a healing aspect in this spiritual approach. Far from affecting only the global south, the climate crisis is now omnipresent in the global north. Nothing that happens here remains without impact in the most remote places. Thank you. That was my presentation.
Barbara.
And thank you, Barbara.
But I have to go back to the stream.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Emmanuel T Blue. And Emmanuel T Blue, I'm impressed at how forward-thinking he is, because in his biography, he doesn't mention his books that he's published about design, or even the book about Georges Bataille, but he talks about what he's doing now. He's the head of the National School of Decorative Arts in Paris, which for 250 years has been training and revealing unique talents in design. And as the head since July 2018, he plans to deploy an ambitious strategy in the areas of education, international policy, and research development. He's paying particularly strong attention to the issues of equality and diversity, and will continue the important work that had been undertaken by his predecessor in the area of governance. And so he's going to speak to us today. He's asked me to translate as he speaks. So we've worked out this, he'll say a sentence or two, and then I will translate to English.
Thank you, Richard. Well, I'm very pleased to be with you tonight for me in Roma, and this noon for you in Atlanta. As Richard said, considering what I want to talk to you about, I'm going to speak in French, and I apologize for it, but I'm just worried that my English is not precise enough to convey clearly. So I warmly thank Richard for agreeing to translate me. Ce que je voudrais essayer de vous faire entendre, c'est qu'il y a une relation très étroite, bien plus étroite qu'on ne l'imagine, entre l'école et l'écologie.
There's a very strong relationship between school, which in French is école, and ecology, which almost seems the same word.
Pour cela, je voudrais développer donc quelques considérations d'abord très générales, puis indiquer plus précisément comment ce lien entre école et écologie est tout particulièrement mis en œuvre dans une école comme celle que je dirige, c'est-à-dire une école supérieure d'art et de design, qui est donc l'école des arts décoratifs.
I will develop my considerations out of this link between the two, which is especially true in the kind of school that I direct, the Higher School of Art and Design, the School of Decorative Arts. And it allows me to make a couple of general and specific observations.
Cette relation étroite entre l'école et l'écologie tient, selon moi, à ce que l'école est le lieu par excellence où s'articulent l'ancien et le nouveau.
This relationship comes from the fact that schools are places where the old and the new, tradition and innovation come together.
Comme vous le savez, l'articulation entre l'ancien et le nouveau ne va jamais de soi. Elle tend souvent à faire querelle, c'est la fameuse querelle des anciens et des modernes qui traverse non seulement toute la culture française, mais toute la culture européenne. Donc, elle tend souvent à faire querelle ou bien crise, selon une belle définition que le philosophe italien Gramsci en donne dans ses cahiers de prison.
As we know, the relationship between old and new is never easy and tends to create conflict that we see throughout the world and in France. The famous struggle between the old and new, or the signs of crisis, as Antonio Gramsci puts it in his notebooks from prison.
en prison, Gramsci écrit donc ceci. La crise consiste dans le fait que l'ancien meurt et que le nouveau ne peut pas naître. Pendant cet interrègne, précise-t-il, on observe les phénomènes morbides les plus variés.
Gramsci writes that crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. And during this interregnum, we see many morbid phenomena of various types.
Vous comprenez donc que l'école est à cet égard le lieu par excellence de la confrontation à la crise, que l'école est toujours au bord ou à la limite de la crise, dans le sens où elle réunit l'ancien qui meurt ou qui est déjà mort. On le dit par exemple de certaines langues, on apprend encore des langues mortes, et le nouveau que l'école a vocation à faire naître ou à accompagner dans son émergence pour dépasser la crise et faire transition. La transition, c'est la forme heureuse du rapport de l'ancien et du nouveau. Hannah Arendt, la philosophe Hannah Arendt, a très bien analysé cela dans un chapitre de la crise de la culture qui s'intitule « La crise de l'éducation ».
As you can see, from this perspective, schools are, by definition, the places for facing crises and are always, in effect, on the edge of a crisis, in the sense that they bring together the dying old or already dead, as we say, for example, for certain languages, and the new, that the schools are called upon then to give birth to, or at least to assist in the development of, in order to overcome the crisis and begin the transition, to take us to the better side of the crisis. Hannah Arendt analyzed this very well in a chapter of The Crisis of Culture titled The Crisis of Education.
Et quand Hannah Arendt parle de la crise de l'éducation, je pense qu'il faut jusqu'à un certain point renverser ou dépasser cette formulation en considérant que l'éducation est intrinsèquement liée à la crise, ou du moins que l'éducation a vocation à travailler à l'endroit même de la possibilité de la crise en proposant des façons de la résoudre, c'est-à-dire de transformer la crise en transition, de passer, en somme, du bon côté de la crise.
But I believe we need to reverse to a certain extent and go beyond her formulation by considering that education is intrinsically linked to crisis, or at least has the job of working on the thing that caused the crisis while proposing ways of resolving it. That is to say, to transform the crisis into transition, to pass over to the better side of the crisis.
Et cette situation de crise est plus largement celle que nous connaissons aujourd'hui. Un monde ancien, le monde thermo-industriel, le monde moderne, celui de l'abondance et du progrès, est promis à la mort et le nouveau monde peine à naître.
This is more or less the kind of crisis we're facing today. An old world, the thermo-industrial world of abundant progress, has shown itself to be on the edge of extinction, while the new world struggles to be born.
Et c'est là une première raison pour laquelle la crise écologique devrait être aujourd'hui la grande affaire de l'école, parce qu'il y a là un enjeu de transition majeur.
This is the first reason why the ecological crisis needs to be a major subject of our teaching, because a major transition is at play.
Et cela devrait d'autant plus être le cas que l'école est le lieu où l'on peut le mieux intégrer ce qu'un autre philosophe, qui fut très proche de Hannah Arendt, Hans Jonas, a appelé l'éthique de la responsabilité, qui est la forme éthique de l'urgence écologique et à laquelle est indissociablement liée la notion de génération future. Or, l'école est précisément le lieu où l'on éprouve concrètement la présence des générations futures, où l'on travaille avec ces générations dans une expérience unique de communauté temporelle.
It should be even more evident in that the school is the place where we best embody what another philosopher, very close to Hannah Arendt, Hans Jonas, called the ethic of responsibility, which gives ethical form to our ecological urgency, indissociable from the future generation. Schools are precisely the places where we feel the presence of future generations, where we work with them in a unique experience of temporal, communal experience.
C'est pourquoi je tiens pour essentiel d'intégrer au maximum les élèves des écoles dans ce qu'on appelle les instances de gouvernance et plus largement dans tous les lieux et les moments où l'on réfléchit à la conduite de l'école. Parce que l'école est le meilleur lieu pour les controverses et les délibérations entre les générations et qu'on ne sortira pas de la crise écologique sans de tels exercices.
This is why I believe it is necessary to integrate our students as much as possible into the governing bodies of our schools and more broadly into all the forums where we think about school governance. Because the school is the best place for settling generational conflict and discussion, and because we will never get out of this ecological crisis without this type of collaboration.
Et c'est sur la base de ces deux principes que j'essaye aujourd'hui d'intégrer les enjeux écologiques à tous les niveaux de mon école, laquelle a en outre un rôle essentiel à jouer du fait de son domaine d'activité qui est celui de l'art et du design.
These are the two principles I use to integrate ecological considerations at all the levels of my school, which also has an important role to play due to the subject matter we teach, art and design.
Les artistes et les designers ont en effet, et on l'a entendu, un rôle majeur à jouer du fait qu'ils conçoivent nos environnements, nos milieux de vie, lesquels sont à la fois visuels et matériels, réels et imaginaires, analogiques et digitaux, vivants et non vivants.
I believe artists and designers have a major role to play due to their bringing to life of environments, of the spaces of life, at once visual and material, real and imaginary, analogical and digital, living and not living.
Et c'est pourquoi, et je vais m'arrêter là, Richard, parce que je m'aperçois que sinon ça va être trop long, mais donc pour conclure, simplement dire que l'enseignement en général gagnerait à mon sens beaucoup à s'inspirer des formes et des méthodes de l'enseignement artistique et des designers qui indiquent un certain nombre de voies pour une école écologique.
And that is why teaching in general, in my opinion, can learn much from the forms and methods of teaching art and design that might provide ways forward towards creating truly ecological teaching.
Well, thank you very much. I had some examples that I wanted to name or develop, but well, I spoke more than 10 minutes, so maybe I will answer questions or we will speak about it in the discussion. Thank you very much.
Yes. Merci beaucoup, Emmanuel. Thank you very much. And I'll pass the mic over to Oliver and Paige.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Emmanuel. I'm glad you mentioned Hans Jonas, the principle of responsibility, by the way. Reading him was actually one of the reasons why I didn't make a driver's license when I was 18. I think his book, that book was actually published around 87, 86, 87, 88. Right? It's amazing. Das Prinzip Verantwortung, everybody should read it. Hello, Paige. Glad to meet you. I'm sorry you had to wait. It's always, but the best for the last, maybe, hopefully. And, and Paige is, first of all, Paige is, as she describes it herself, I think, wears all the hats, that was the term, for Nature Now, a small but nimble environmental non-profit, just like we are non-profits, Allianz and Goethe, freshly minted in early 2021. And I know you're in a very interesting phase right now with this. Your goal is to inspire appreciation and understanding of our environment. She arranges a multi-day festival that primarily focuses on environmental documentaries and films, but also includes strong visual arts and live music. And maybe we should talk about why. Paige, when I met you the first time, you had a guest there, and I found that right away fascinating, who was an award-winning director, I think, of a documentary that had to do with environment in a sense. And so you're really in the depth of communicating nature and climate crisis. Maybe we should start with the question, what is this festival? Where is it? When is it? And why is it? Is that all the W's we have? Probably not.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm down in Columbus, Georgia, and I hope I don't sound too lowbrow with my American Southern accent with all the European accents. This has been fun. Yes, I'm down in Columbus, Georgia. I've worked for other environmental nonprofits over the past 10 years or so, and in a partnership, this event sort of began to eclipse the single missions of individual nonprofits. And so that's why it was established as its own nonprofit this year. And we work with the other environmental nonprofits. As you all may know, most environmental nonprofits are understaffed. It's usually 1 or 2 people, often part-time. So we're able to partner up with them and bring this program, which is multiple days of environmental documentaries and films. There are other components. We try to add hands-on activities. We bring in filmmakers to do Q&A with the audience. We're adding live music this year. I don't know if you want to just pepper me with questions, or I can read through sort of, you know, what I had written up about the content of the films that we screen specifically regarding climate change. I can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that would be interesting, I think. I would also like to know, maybe in an aftermath, how you decided on those contents, basically. What do you have to think about when you put together such a program? Because since our goal is to communicate climate change in the best way, you know, in an activating way as well. Thank you.
Definitely. And, you know, really, there are almost 20 different genres of environmental documentaries. And it's everything from outdoor adventure, which are the adrenaline junkies, the base jump and slackline and all that crazy stuff, mountain biking, to plastic pollution, public health, sustainable agriculture. And there's really a lot to choose from. What my specialty is coming up with themes for certain blocks of film. And a film block is just a collection of films that are similar in theme, like climate change. Sometimes you can do a one that's sort of like a potpourri, where it's called Best of Festival, and you can be all over the map with the with content. But this year we do have a climate crisis block that addresses that content specifically. Yeah, so I have to watch a lot of films. I can tell you a main challenge coming up the past year is virtual streaming burnout. I think people are ready to get back in audiences and engage again. And these films really do engage people. And so I kind of choreograph sort of the mood that each film brings, because honestly, you can get kind of dark when you get into climate change, and it can really, you know, you don't want to alienate your audience. And so I try to make sure there's a good mix. I mean, yes, you want to disturb people to a certain degree because it's urgent and it's a serious situation and it's real. But fortunately, there are some other films that are a little more lighthearted, and we'll mix those in. But for example, one of the anchor films for the climate crisis block that we'll have in August, it's August 19th and through the 21st. If anybody's nearby, come down. We'd love to have you. But there's a film called Change of Color, and it was actually shot in Greenland with about an artist named Zaria Foreman, who does these massive pastel landscapes of the Arctic and in Greenland. And the director, Jenny Nichols, is a friend of mine, and she'll be in town to talk about that film and her experience, you know, filming Zaria as an artist, and what her motivations were and what she sees when she interprets these photographs that she turns into, and I mean like giant wall-sized pastels. They're beautiful. Another filmmaker that will be here is a woman named Morgan Heim, and we screened one of her films in the past called Ghost in the Making, and it's about the rusty-patched bumblebee. And we all know what the climate change is doing for pollinators and for insects, and that is actually the only bee that is on the endangered species list. It's a good film. Most of my films are shorts, you know, especially if you've got a heavy topic. Getting people these days with the shortened attention spans can be difficult to have them set for a length of time. So that's an example of two of the artists or filmmakers that I will have here. But we do incorporate art exhibitions, and I have a really good relationship with Columbus State University. That's a local college. They're part of the university network system, which, by the way, there's a new, the Georgia Climate Project, which is based on the statewide university network. I think they kind of kicked off their first conference in 2019, which was bad timing for the pandemic, but they're back on the books for this August, I believe, on Jekyll Island. So that's the Georgia Climate Project. I think anybody in the state of Georgia should check that out. We're screening, we are going to screen a feature film about John Bartram, who was a early 18th century naturalist who came through this part of the world and wrote a lot about longleaf pine and the cahaba lilies and many things that really don't exist anymore. The longleaf pine ecosystem stretched from Virginia all the way to Texas, and it was 90 million acres, and there's less than 2% of that left now. So we partner with Nature Conservancy and the Longleaf Pine Alliance, and they'll come in and do a panel discussion on topics like that, like trying to, the restorative efforts to get longleaf pine ecosystem back out there, and then all of the wildlife and flora and fauna that are part of that ecosystem. Like the cahaba lily. And so in tandem with this film called Cultivating the Wild, Dorinda Dallmeyer, who I think was the director of environmental ethics certificate program at UGA, was the writer for this film, and she will be here to talk about it along with some artists and the filmmaker. And one of the artists is a lady named Darlene Labar, who does 3D printer florals. And she's actually, this is going to be very cool. We sent her some information, and she's going to 3D print out the cahaba lily, because we've been locally, they've been doing restorative plantings to get the cahaba lilies reestablished on the rapids, because we reestablished some rapids here in Columbus about 10 years ago. And they are in consideration for the endangered species list, and they only grow in Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. And so we'll feature that topic and have that discussion. And then we've got this art exhibition in tandem with a film. And that's really the kind of programming that I put together. And it seems to be very meaningful. There's an energy in the audience. And I think it's a really good way to be able to convey these messages, you know, about climate change in a really powerful medium. You know, art moves people, and film can really hit home with messaging.
Yeah, it sounds like a really good program. Could you repeat when it is?
Oh, it's August 19th through the 21st.
They have good music.
We've been doing virtual everything, but CSU surprised us a couple of months ago and gave us dates on location. They've got an amazing theater complex. We have 2 different theaters, and so I do 6 different blocks of films over 3 days with the art and the workshops. And so that's August 19th through the 21st. And it's the first full weekend that the school is back in session.
Ah, excellent. Yeah. And I'm again, like everyone here, you will also do something for our culture, contemporary culture segment, and so that will be obviously a little bit curating some movies for us on the topic in French and German and English language. Awesome. Yeah. Richard.
Yes, I think we've had a very wonderful, some very wonderful presentations that have brought together very disparate and very different levels of consideration, going from film to theater to activism to pedagogy to photography. Now, different media and different levels of ways of engaging people. So I'm very excited about what kind of questions the audience might have, and I might just launch with one question. I was very fascinated. You know, I'm a Renaissance scholar, and I love the Frédéric's quotation of, or her use of, the idea of the theater of the world. Now, the Teatrum Mundi was a commonplace in the Renaissance when people were, when we were first discovering the world. And my question for everyone here is using that. How does, if today the world is a theater, the theater that we are acting in, how does role playing allow us, or how does it work in the communication about climate change? Is Frederic still here?
I am.
Good. Of course, you're the one that has to answer if no one else can, because you inspired the question.
I can launch the discussion with that. I think we were all more or less discussing this question of role playing and acting in a precarious world. I think what is fascinating in all the wonderful talks and examples we had is the way in which climate change has forced us to reconsider our actions and our alliances. So I'm really interested in the way in which basically this new theater of the world, Theatrum Mundi, is changed. The fact that we have to include new actors, just to follow the metaphor, new actors to share the stage. And I think that's what the different things that we have been shown explain. I was very interested in what Barbara just said, that the way that suddenly we have to make room for those other ways to act in the world. I was also very interested in what Emmanuel T Blue said, the fact that designers, artists actually create the world, create the theater, create the environment, and that's why we need them to think differently. So that's, I think we were all answering that question more or less. Thank you, Richard.
If I may add to this real quick, so I didn't talk about it that much, but we work a lot with young people, with students, but also like all ages from elementary school to university. And I wouldn't call it role play, but of course, what we try to do with them is to make them into young scientists, basically, and explorers, and break the boundaries so that they're not approaching climate change as children necessarily, but as equals in a sense with the scientists. And in that regard, they also explore new ideas and new concepts that maybe older people like us here in the room don't come up with, how to approach climate change and solutions to climate change. So this is also very interesting, and in a sense, I mean, that's I'm not a theoretical expert, but of course this playfulness that we tend to lose very often as adults, as grown-ups, that's still more existing with the younger generation. I think that's also something we can learn a lot from them. So that's my response to that.
Yeah, I found that interesting actually, that so many that we always have these connections. None of you participants, you all communicate in your field, but none of you kind of remains in your field, but connects everything. I think that is really an interesting lesson for me out of this conference here, and I hope to see more of that in the fall. I'm encouraging our audience really to write in, or you raise your hand. You can also raise your hand with some Zoom function and ask questions. I see here something. Thoughts triggered from listening. We are trying to get effective carbon pricing passed in the United States, actually all over the world. Yes. To learn more, check us out here, Citizens Climate Lobby. Okay. Energy innovation, carbon. One of the other bills, okay, this is all about getting this through. That's very important news. How do we stage the issue for what is the best way to stage the drama of carbon pricing with the carbon pricing border adjustment looming in Europe is one question. I don't know who feels comfortable to answer that. The other, how do we stage the issue for conservatives? And I don't, yeah. So this is all about staging. I think maybe that actually, if I can ask this question, Barbara, what do you think? How do you stage that best, in your opinion? I mean, basically your work tells me that already, but maybe you want to add something to it. And Paige, how would you stage that in a film festival that brings together very different points of view?
I'm so sorry. Did you address me with a question? I'm sorry, I missed that. What was it?
How would you stage, for example, the carbon pricing, and how would you stage it for people who are kind of more in doubt that climate crisis is a man-made thing? I think I can rephrase it that way.
That's a great
I guess your audience or potential audience might have their doubts as well. So
yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on with that. And that is a real issue, especially in this part of the United States. And really, when I go looking around for content, that's something that is a reality that I run into, is finding things that are hyper local or local to this region, which is more identifiable for our audience, right? Like, I mean, except for Atlanta, Georgia is a super red state. And so that's, I think one of my faculty people from Columbus State University put it this way, because I do work with utilities. I mean, I accept funding from them because they set aside a lot of funding for environmental education. But also when I get nervous about some of the more extreme, positions or opinions out there, because I really get both ends of the spectrum and that spectrum in my audience. The way he put it was, you get further by having everybody at the table than you do by chaining yourself to the front doors of the corporate headquarters. Or in our case, getting everybody at the theater. And that's really the best way to change people's minds or their perspectives. And when they can be in there with their peers, right? And it's face to face and that energy that I was talking about. I think you do get people to consider. And I was really fascinated with what, I believe it was Max, who was the climate ecologist, or not ecologist, economist. Yeah. That is something, that's a topic. I've got a list of things that I really want to get to, and I don't always get to everything each year at my event. And that's why we're doing more and more of these through the year, smaller events to address specific topics. But really green investing, the angle from the economy, I think that's really important. And actually, I think that might make more sense, for lack of a better way to describe this, to a MAGA hat wearing person. I think people of that mentality in conservative politics, really money is always at the top of their list. And so you talk to them in terms they can understand, or show them films and have a discussion in terms that they can relate to. You might have a better chance of helping, get somebody to think differently. And I'd like to say this as well. It's sort of, I do get a little bit of a hard time of dealing with, taking support from utilities, but unless you live in a wood cabin out in the woods and use a Franklin stove and smoke signals to communicate and ride a horse to town and grow all your own food, no one's hands are clean. Everybody uses electricity, and you can choose to not drive a car, but if you live in a rural area, that's not really an option. And our audience tend to be very highly educated, high income level people. And we work really hard. It's part of my mission is to reach into more disadvantaged neighborhoods and areas where people are not getting this communications. I joke with the Nature Conservancy that the primary demographic we have are NPR listeners, Subaru drivers, and millennials. And they already know. So working with the school system and working with different community groups to get a more diverse audience in the theater is top priority for us. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Yeah, great. And I asked the same question kind of to Barbara, but I want to reformulate it a little bit. Thank you for joining us. She has a meeting now.
Thank you, Paige.
See you in the fall. Barbara, I want to reformulate a little bit. We're striving to have an event with your art projected on a wall and underlined, or however you say that, with the Pastorale by Beethoven. That's part of the project that we're striving for in the fall. And that's what you do in part with your photography. So what do you hope? Do you hope to bring people together that have different opinions with that, or what's the idea behind public art in the end?
Yeah, it's quite complex, my work. Let's say that there is much behind it. You know, I started with just taking pictures of these indigenous peoples all around the world, but on the other side, I wanted to tell everybody on the world we are all connected. We are all on the same on this blue planet, and this is our problem worldwide. So if we do something there, that there will happen something on the other side of the world. So I try to work in an empathic way. I don't want to show climate crisis. I don't want to show catastrophe pictures, because we have them all day in news, and it's not really touches us. So what I do is I just show people. I just connect people, and before I want to talk a little bit about the Pastorale, I want to say something else, because when I make these exhibitions out there in public areas, I try to bring it to as much people as I can, that as much people from all educations can see my work. That is important. And when I am there, I have this offer to everybody, which is called part of the art. I take pictures of the people who want to connect with my work, and they have to tell me their name and where they are from, and I make these little pictures of them, and I make kind of like Tibetan prayer flags of all these faces surrounded my work of tropic ice, and I kind of call these people, and hopefully they will become more and more from all over the world, and so this is a statement of all these people to connect themselves with my work. This is one part, and then yes, I'm really with Frederic. We have to unite our strength, and that's why they asked me to bebilder. I don't know how to say that in English.
To give images.
To give an image of the Pastorale of Beethoven. They asked me last year to do that. We had this Beethoven year, and I had a huge exhibition, and I couldn't have a vernissage, and so they asked me if I want to bebilder this Pastorale of Beethoven, which was the opening concert of this festival, and that came in my field, and that was so great for me. I was so excited about it, because Beethoven did this in 5 movements, and all this work is about five continents, 5 indigenous peoples. 5 is a symbol for human beings, and so I have this Pastorale of Beethoven where he has this nature in it. You know, the theme about this work is nature, and so I have these 5 movements, and I could illustrate all movement in a different kind of way with all these pictures from tropic ice, and I found it very exciting to do this, and you have. I mean, you have this music from Beethoven together with all these continents, these people, and this is really great. And I showed it live with the symphony orchestra in last year, and I could see it touches people. You know, they came to me and said it touched me so much. You know, your pictures with the music, and I think this is a great chance for us to work, you know, in these different fields of art, and I really love that. I am a photographer, but I love to do it in a different kind of way. I mean, interdisciplinary with all the other artistic disciplines. I found this very thrilling. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have a question from Latif about technology having been a source of the problem, and what our considerations are on communicating with technologies in order to make them a part of the solution. But I wanted to try and weave it in a question for Emmanuel T Blue, asking him about the same question because design and the decorative arts are very often linked with urban cultures, and so is the climate crisis. Now, it seems that we are one of the questions asked here was the political question. How do we communicate to people that are living a different experience and very often live in rural areas? And I know Emmanuel has some strong ideas on rural design, and I was wondering if that links into the communicating to this question. And I can help if you want to speak in French, or if you want me to repeat my question, which was kind of long.
No, it's okay, and I can try in English, and maybe you will translate. No, the idea is that, and Barbara told very well what can be the role of artist and designer, and what we can learn from artists and designer. They're the main challenge, which is rebuild the relationship between sense, experience, and the world. And today there is a big challenge, I think, with rural areas, and design has been design born in industrial and urban culture. And the main topic is today, I think, is to escape from industry, escape from modernity. And design is historically linked to modernity and to industry. But design is the best way, I think, to think and rethink functionality. And today, the main issue is to invent new functionalities, and I think that rural areas are good places to reinvent functionalities, because they focus all the issues that Occidental societies have to face. I mean, mobility challenge, the fact that people are living older and older, and what we call the functionality of technology. All these subjects are very important in rural areas, and I think that rural areas can be laboratories of a new relationship between sense, experience, and the world, and a laboratory also for new functionalities. I'm not sure to be very clear. I hope it was rather clear.
That was very good.
Well, near Atlanta, there's the first big experience of what we can call rural design with a rural studio. which is rural architecture and rural design. And I'm very, you know it, Richard, I'm very interested of it.
Yes, would anyone else like to address this issue of the urban-rural divide in your work? And I think in another 5 minutes we'll wrap this up and thank everyone. We're a few minutes over just because we had some technical issues there.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, of course, the issues are different in rural areas, and also, of course, in different climate zones, right? I mean, we have dry areas, we have areas that are more affected by flooding, by heavy rain events. We have areas that are maybe more affected by sea level rise, like if you're on the coast, and areas that are affected by thawing of glaciers in mountain regions. So it's very different, of course, from an urban environment. And I do think there's in principle, even a better access point to communicate about climate change in rural areas, because people are more connected, more exposed to the impacts of climate change, and also are more connected to the history of the place. So they will know more how things have changed over time compared to 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And I do think we do have a good access point by now. We also have very positive stories we can tell. We have right now in July, I wanted to highlight this. We're doing an activity, summer program with the Consulate General of Germany in Atlanta in Mississippi on the Gulf Coast. So in an area where maybe you would think there is not so much interest in climate education and climate action, but we did get a lot of feedback. It's young people. I think the young generation is very interested and very open to this kind of communication and discussion. And so I think there is a lot of change and possibility in rural areas in the young generation.
Thank you. And Frederic, did you want to add something to that issue? Are you?
Yes, I could just go completely in the direction of Emmanuel and Max. I'm also leading a small program in Paris that tries to link together art and science and design and research. And just regarding this important question that somebody in the audience raised, how do you convince the people who are not convinced yet? I think it's a key question, because of course we all agree together, but the point is really, how do you reach another kind of audience? The conservative people and the people who continue the kind of techno-industrialist system which destroys cities like Detroit, as we know very well. How can this kind of system survive its own failure? This is one of the things which is so fascinating. So the point really, what I would just wanted to add is the fact that one of the things that I find really a challenge is how to convince people outside of our own field, first of all, and second, how to convince people who have the power, who don't really want to change things. And third, exactly like Emmanuel and Max, I really believe in the power of school, of education in answering this challenge. And it's really the little hope we can have, I mean, as for me, really lies on that generation and the fact that they are in a way much more advanced than us, and we can share with them ideas and attempts and art forms, and also, you know, utopia and this kind of thing. So yes, the school and images working together is really one important aspect, I think, of this challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frederic. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Max and Paige, who is signed off already. We've had a wonderful panel, and I would like to encourage everyone to keep an eye on the Goethe and the Alliance Française websites, because we are continuing this project throughout the rest of the year, and our speakers will be coming back to see us again, and we're trying to get a very some very important figures to come to speak at the Alliance Française and Goethe, as well as screening films and doing concerts and having live discussions and maybe even a poetry reading or two. So please keep an eye on the Alliance Française Goethe, and thank you very much for participating in this. And I'll let Oliver say the closing words as well.
I have nothing to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Very good. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you very much.